I have not spoken to my father's side of the family in 11 years. I want you to understand that before anything else, because what happened in Kipling, Mississippi, did not happen to someone who went looking for trouble or answers or connection. It happened to someone who had burned every bridge south of the Mason-Dixon line and only went back because a lawyer called and said there was a building with her name on the deed. My name is Renee Toussaint Watts. I'm 34. I teach 8th grade English in Columbus, Ohio, and I have been teaching 8th grade English in Columbus, Ohio for 7 years, which means I am very good at identifying when someone is lying to me and very bad at knowing when I'm lying to myself. I grew up in Kipling until I was 12. Then my mother moved us to Cincinnati after the divorce, and I became a Midwestern girl with a Mississippi accent I spent my entire adolescence sanding down to nothing. I do not fish. I do not go to church. I have not voluntarily touched red clay since 2015. These are not complaints. They are coordinates. I'm telling you where I stood so you understand how far I fell. Aunt Marvel died on a Tuesday in February. Massive stroke. 71 years old. They found her sitting upright in the intake room of Toussaint Family Funeral Home, which she had operated alone for the last 9 years, since Uncle Clyde passed. The lawyer, a very patient man named Jeffcoat, who spoke like he was reading you a children's book, told me the building, the license, the 2 adjacent lots, and a 2019 Cadillac hearse were mine, not my father's, not my cousin's, mine specifically by name in a will updated 3 weeks before she died. I asked Jeffcoat why. He said, "Ms. Watts, your aunt did not share her reasoning with me, and I learned a long time ago not to ask a Toussaint woman why she's done what she's done." I laughed at that. I should not have laughed at that. I drove down from Columbus on a Thursday, 11 hours. I told my principal I needed a week for a funeral, which was true, and to settle an estate, which was true, and that I'd be back by Monday, which turned out to be the most extravagant lie I have ever told. Kipling, Mississippi sits in Leake County, about an hour northeast of Jackson, in that stretch of central Mississippi where the red hills start breaking apart into the alluvial plain. The town is not dying. The town died. What's left is the skeleton, a post office, a Dollar General, 2 churches, a volunteer fire department, and Toussaint Family Funeral Home, which is the largest occupied building on Main Street and has been since 1951. I arrived after dark because I did not account for construction outside Meridian. The town had no streetlights I could see. My headlights swept across the front of the funeral home, and I almost kept driving because for a moment it looked occupied. There was a shape in the front window that could have been a person standing very still watching me pull in. When I parked and looked again, it was a floor lamp with a dark shade. The key Jeffcoat had mailed me worked on the side door. I stepped inside and the smell hit me. Not death, not chemicals, but old carpet and magnolia air freshener, and something underneath both of those that I recognized from childhood but could not name. Aunt Marvel's smell. The smell of her house, her clothes, her car, the particular blend of cocoa butter and cedar sachets and whatever was in the walls of a building that has held the dead since before the Civil Rights Act. The funeral home is 3 stories. The ground floor is the public area, the viewing parlor, the arrangement room, the front office. The second floor is the preparation area, the embalming room, cold storage, the dressing room, supply closets. The third floor is a small apartment where Aunt Marvel lived. I dragged my suitcase up 2 flights of narrow stairs and found a made bed, a clean kitchen, and a note on the table in Marvel's handwriting. It said, "The storm book is in the top drawer of the office desk downstairs. If weather comes before Jeffcoat explains, read it first and do everything it says. I am sorry I could not tell you in person. I am sorry for many things. But you are the one I chose, and I do not believe I chose wrong." I set the note down. I looked at it for a long time. Then I went to bed because I was tired, and because I assumed the way you assume about dead relatives you haven't spoken to that Marvel had been old and alone and possibly eccentric in the way that living above your own embalming room for a decade might make you eccentric. I did not go downstairs and open the drawer. I want you to remember that. I had the chance and I chose sleep. Every decision after that one was made in the dark. The funeral was Saturday. There were more people than I expected, maybe 60. In a town I'd have guessed held 200. They came from the county, from Jackson, from as far as Hattiesburg. Black families mostly, because Toussaint was the only black funeral home in a 50-mile radius and had been for 3 generations. People touched my arm and said things like, "Your aunt carried this town, and Marvel did what no one else would do." And I nodded and accepted it because what else do you do when strangers are grieving someone you abandoned? A woman named Odessa Pratt, who was 80 if she was a day, held my hands in both of hers and said, "You staying?" I said, "I'm here for the week." She looked at me like I'd said something in a language she didn't speak. "No, baby. Are you staying?" I told her I taught school in Ohio. She nodded slowly, released my hands, and walked away without another word. After the burial, Kipling Memorial, a quarter-mile north of town, red clay so dense the gravediggers had started 2 days early. I went back to the funeral home and sat in the arrangement room, which is where families come to pick caskets and plan services. It was a beautiful room. Aunt Marvel had made it beautiful. Cream wallpaper, mahogany wainscoting, framed photographs of every Toussaint going back to my great-great-grandfather Absalom, who started the business in a shed behind a church in 1951 with a folding table, a set of second-hand tools, and a belief that black people in Leake County deserved to be buried with the same dignity white people took for granted. I sat in that room and looked at those photographs and felt something I was not prepared for, which was shame. Not guilt. Shame is different. It lives deeper. It doesn't argue with you. It just shows you what you are. I had left this place and never come back, and Marvel had held it alone for 9 years, and she had still, at the end, chosen me. I went downstairs to the front office. I opened the top drawer of the desk. The storm book was a composition notebook, black and white marbled cover, college ruled, the kind I buy in bulk every August for my students. It was nearly full. The first half was in handwriting I didn't recognize, older, more formal, probably Uncle Clyde's. The second half was Marvel's. The last entry was dated 11 days before her death. The first page said this: Toussaint Family Funeral Home Storm Night Protocol for family members operating the home. Do not share with staff, clergy, clients, or law enforcement. These instructions are not symbolic. They are not precautions. They are the terms of an agreement that predates this building and cannot be renegotiated. A storm night is any night when the National Weather Service has issued a tornado watch, tornado warning, severe thunderstorm warning, or flash flood warning for Leake County. Storm season begins when it begins. The weather decides. You do not. On a storm night, you will not leave the building between the first warning siren and sunrise. You will follow every rule in this book in exact order. If you do not, the building will not protect you, and you will join the collection. I turned the page. Rule 1. When the first siren sounds, go to the second floor. Check cold storage. Count the bodies. Write the number on the intake log. This number must be exact. If the number does not match the intake log's existing count, do not investigate the discrepancy. Adjust the log to match what is physically present. The new number is correct. The old number was always wrong. Rule 2. Close and lock every door on the ground floor. Use the deadbolts, not the knob locks. Deadbolts were installed for this purpose. The ground floor does not belong to you on storm nights. You are permitting its use. Do not go back downstairs until sunrise. Rule 3. At some point after midnight, you will hear someone in the viewing parlor. They will be having a conversation. It will sound like 2 or 3 people discussing arrangements, casket selection, flower preferences, music for the service. This is normal. Do not interrupt. Do not listen closely enough to identify voices. They are planning, and they are entitled to plan. Rule 4. Between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m., the freight elevator may operate on its own. It will travel between the ground floor and the second floor repeatedly. It is bringing what it needs to bring. Do not attempt to use the elevator during this window. Take the stairs if you must move between floors. If the elevator stops on the second floor and the doors open, do not look inside. Say, "I'm not ready yet." The doors will close. Rule 5. If the phone rings during a storm night, answer it. Always. It will be someone asking about a loved one when the service is, what the hours are, whether the body is ready for viewing. Answer their questions honestly based on your current caseload. If they ask about a name you do not recognize, tell them the service is scheduled and they are welcome to attend. Give them tomorrow's date. They will thank you and hang up. Under no circumstances tell a caller that you do not have their loved one. You do. You may not have processed them yet. Rule 6. You will want to check the preparation room. Do not. Whatever is happening there during a storm night is being done competently and with respect. The work being done is the same work you do. They learned it here. Rule 7. If the power goes out, light the candles in the hallway sconces. Marvel installed battery-operated candles in 2019. Use those. Do not use real flame. Real flame changes the terms. Rule 8. Near dawn, usually between 4:30 and 5:15 a.m., someone will knock on the apartment door. 3 knocks. Slow. Do not answer. Say, "Through the door." The home will open at 9. The knocking will stop. If they knock a 4th time, they are not following the protocol either. Open the door. Help them. Rule 9. At sunrise, go to the second floor. Count the bodies in cold storage again. The number will be different from the number you wrote down. Update the intake log. These are real people. They need real services. Prepare them with the same care you would prepare anyone. Their families will call within 48 hours. Rule 10. You will find payment on the office desk. It is always exact. It is always cash. Do not deposit it in the business account. There is a lockbox in the floor of the storage closet on the second floor. Put the payment there. This money is for the building. Marvel will explain. Below Rule 10 in Marvel's handwriting. Marvel cannot explain because Marvel is dead. Here is what Clyde told me and what his mother told him. The building has a congregation. They were here before the building and they will be here after it. Absalom did not build the funeral home because he wanted to. He built it because they needed one. The storm is when they bring their dead. The rules keep the living out of the way while the dead are served. Follow the rules and you are the director of 2 congregations. Break the rules and there is only 1 congregation and you are in it. I closed the notebook. I sat in the office chair. Outside, the February Mississippi sky was doing what it does low cloud cover, warm enough to be wrong, the air pressurized and waiting. I opened my phone and checked the weather. There was a severe thunderstorm watch for Leake County beginning at 10 p.m. I'm going to tell you what I did, and you're going to think I was stupid and you're going to be right. But you're going to be right in the way that everyone is right who has never sat alone in a building full of the dead, in a town where they buried their aunt that morning and read a handwritten notebook that sounded like a woman they loved trying to keep them alive from the far side of a stroke. I stayed. I did not stay because I believed the notebook. I stayed because I believed Marvell. Those are different things. Marvel was not crazy. Marvel was the most organized, competent, unsentimental woman I had ever known. She had run a funeral home alone in a dying town for nearly a decade, and every record, every file, every inventory sheet I had found in the building was immaculate. If Marvel said there was a storm book, there was a reason for the storm book, and the reason might be grief or superstition or dementia. But it also might be the reason Marvel had chosen me specifically, by name, 3 weeks before she died, because she needed someone she trusted to be in the building when the weather came. So I stayed. I made coffee. I ate a sandwich from the cooler of food someone had brought to the burial. I read the storm book again, slower this time, noting the places where Clyde's handwriting changed, where he'd scratched something out, where he'd added notes in the margin. One of his marginal notes, next to Rule 3, said, "Sometimes sounds like mama. Don't matter. Don't go down." At 9:47 p.m., the siren went off. If you've never heard a tornado siren in rural Mississippi, I need you to understand that it does not sound like a warning. It sounds like the sky is in pain. It's a rising, falling, mechanical wail that bounces off the clay hills and comes back at you from directions it shouldn't. In a city, it's background noise. In Kipling, Mississippi, at night, alone in a funeral home, it is the loneliest sound in the world. I went to the second floor. Cold storage at Toussaint's is a walk-in refrigeration unit that Uncle Clyde installed in 1988. It holds 6 gurneys. On the night of Marvel's funeral, there were 2 bodies in residence: a man named Harold Stamps, 87, whose service was scheduled for the following Wednesday, and a woman named Corinne Belk, 64, who had died at home and whose family was still making arrangements. I knew this because I had spent part of the afternoon going through Marvel's active case files, trying to understand what I'd inherited. I opened the cold storage door. The light inside was fluorescent and steady. Harold Stamps was on gurney 1. Corinne Belk was on gurney 3. Both were covered with white sheets. Both were exactly where they were supposed to be. There was a body on gurney 5. I stood in the doorway and I counted. I counted again. I counted a third time because counting is what I do. I am a teacher. I count heads. I take attendance. I notice when someone is present who should not be. 2 bodies on the intake log. 3 bodies in the room. I looked at gurney 5. The sheet was the same as the others, white, clean, tucked. Whoever was underneath was small, short. The shape beneath the sheet suggested a person curled slightly to one side, which is not how you lay a body out, which is how a person sleeps. Rule 1 said to adjust the log. I picked up the clipboard hanging by the door. I crossed out 2 and wrote 3. My hand was steady. I want you to know that. I was not shaking. I was not panicking. I was doing what the book said to do, because I had decided to do what the book said to do. And I have always been someone who follows through on a decision once it's made. That quality has cost me a marriage and several friendships. That night, it may have saved my life. I closed the cold storage door. I locked it. I went to the stairwell and began locking the ground floor doors. The funeral home has 4 ground floor doors: the main entrance on Main Street, the side entrance where I'd come in the first night, a back door that opens onto the parking lot, and the loading door for the garage where the hearse is kept. Each has a deadbolt. Clyde's handwriting in the margin next to Rule 2, side door sticks, lift and push, don't leave it for last. He was right. The side door stuck. I lifted the handle, pushed, and the deadbolt slid home with a heavy sound that I felt in my wrist bones. I locked the last door, the main entrance, and as I turned the deadbolt, I looked through the glass panel beside the door and saw Main Street in the rain. The street light at the intersection was out. The Dollar General across the road was dark, but there was a car parked in front of the funeral home that had not been there when I locked the side door 90 seconds earlier. It was a dark sedan, older model. It was running. I could see exhaust curling from the tailpipe into the warm rain. The headlights were off, but the interior dome light was on, and I could see a figure in the driver's seat. They were not looking at the building. They were looking down at their lap, the way you look at a phone or a piece of paper, like someone checking an address. I stepped back from the glass. I turned off the hallway light so they couldn't see me. I stood in the dark and watched. The car door opened. A woman got out. She was black, maybe 60, wearing a dark dress and a hat with a small brim. She carried a purse. She walked up the front steps with the particular careful walk of someone in church shoes on wet wood. She stopped at the door. She did not knock. She did not try the handle. She stood facing the door, close enough that her breath would have fogged the glass, and she waited. I held still. After about 30 seconds, she turned and walked back to the car. She got in. She sat for a moment. Then she pulled away slowly, heading north on Main Street. No headlights. The dome light went off as she turned the corner, and then the street was empty again, and the only sound was rain on the roof and my own pulse in my ears. I went upstairs. I did not go back down. The apartment on the 3rd floor has one window facing Main Street and one facing the back lot. I sat in Marvel's armchair, a brown velvet recliner with a crocheted throw over the back, and I listened. The storm was building. Mississippi thunderstorms in February are not like Midwestern storms. They don't announce themselves with a wall of wind and a temperature drop. They seep in. The barometric pressure falls slowly, like someone sitting down on your chest 1 pound at a time, and the thunder comes from every direction because the hills hold the sound and pass it back and forth until you can't tell if the storm is coming or going or just breathing. At 12:20 a.m., I heard voices downstairs. Rule 3 said I would. Rule 3 said it would sound like 2 or 3 people discussing arrangements. It did not sound like 2 or 3 people. It sounded like 4 or 5, maybe more. The voices were muffled by 2 floors and 3 locked doors, but they were real voices, real cadence, real rhythm, the particular music of black Southern conversation, where 3 people are all talking at once and everyone is still somehow listening. I could not make out words, but I could make out tone. Someone was disagreeing with someone else, not arguing. Disagreeing the way you disagree in a funeral home arrangement room, which is to say carefully, lovingly, because the stakes are the dignified farewell of someone everyone at the table loves. I did not go downstairs. I did not try to listen more closely. I sat in the armchair and graded papers. I had brought a stack of essays. My 8th graders were writing personal narratives, and most of them were terrible, and grading terrible essays is the most grounding activity I know. You cannot be afraid when you're writing topic sentence in red ink for the 40th time. The voices lasted about an hour. They faded the way a meeting fades in stages, with the last 2 voices lingering near the door, saying the soft things you say when the business is done and you're just standing with someone you haven't seen in a while. Then quiet. Then the elevator. The freight elevator at Toussaint's is a hydraulic lift installed in 1973. It connects the ground floor to the 2nd floor. It's used to move caskets, gurneys, and flower arrangements. It makes a sound like an old man clearing his throat. A low hydraulic groan, then the rattle of the gate, then the hum of the motor as it moves. It is not a subtle machine. At 1:45 a.m., it started. Ground floor to 2nd floor, pause. 2nd floor to ground floor, pause. Ground floor to 2nd floor. The rhythm was steady at about 4 minutes per cycle. I sat in the armchair and listened to it go up and down, and I want to tell you that I was calm, but I was not calm. I was the particular kind of not calm that teachers develop, which is the ability to function in a state of continuous moderate alarm without anyone being able to tell. My hands were still. My breathing was even. My brain was running a ticker tape that said, "This is not real, this is not real, this is not real." And my body was saying, "Then why is the elevator moving, Renee? Why is the elevator moving?" It ran for almost an hour. 23 minutes into it, the cycle broke. The elevator went to the 2nd floor and stopped. I heard the gate rattle open. The sound came up through the floor. The 2nd floor is directly below the apartment. and it was so close and so clear that I stood up from the chair without deciding to. The gate stayed open. I could hear the hydraulics holding, that low, patient hum of a machine waiting. Rule 4. If the elevator stops on the second floor and the doors open, do not look inside. Say, "I'm not ready yet." I did not go to the second floor. I stood in the apartment and said, to the floor, to the building, to whatever was listening, "I'm not ready yet." The gate closed. The elevator descended. The cycling resumed. 12 minutes later, it stopped for the night. At 2:40 a.m., the phone rang. The landline was in the office downstairs, but Marvel had installed a cordless handset in the apartment. It rang with the particular shrill of a phone that has not been updated since 2003. I picked it up. "Toussaint Family Funeral Home," I said, because that is what you say when you answer the phone at a funeral home, even at 2:40 in the morning, even when your hands are shaking so badly you almost drop the handset. A woman's voice. Older. Polite in the way that only Southern black women of a certain generation are polite, where the politeness is not weakness but architecture, it holds everything else up. "Good evening. I'm calling about my husband. His name is James Mosley. I was told he's been brought to you." I did not have a James Mosley. I had Harold Stamps, Corinne Belk, and whoever was on Gurney 5. Rule 5. If they ask about a name you do not recognize, tell them the service is scheduled and they are welcome to attend. Give them tomorrow's date. "Yes, ma'am," I said. "Mr. Mosley is here with us. We have his service scheduled for tomorrow. You're welcome to attend." Silence. Not empty silence. Full silence. The kind where someone is holding the phone and feeling something so large it has temporarily stopped their ability to speak. "Tomorrow," she said. "Yes, ma'am." "Oh, that's sooner than I expected. I wasn't sure if I have a dress. I have his suit, too. Should I bring his suit?" I paused. This was not in the rules. This was a woman asking me if she should bring her dead husband's suit, and the question was so ordinary and so devastating that I forgot for a moment that this call should not be happening. "If you'd like him in his own suit, you can bring it by in the morning," I said. "We open at 9. He always wore the gray one. For church, he'd want the gray one." "The gray one sounds perfect." "Thank you, baby. Thank you. I've been waiting to hear. Nobody tells you anything. You just wait, and then someone finally tells you where he is. He's here, Mrs. Mosley. He's being taken care of." She made a sound that was not crying. It was quieter than crying. It was the sound of a knot being untied. "God bless you," she said. "I'll be there at 9. She hung up. I sat with the phone in my lap for a long time. The storm was directly overhead now. The thunder was not cracking. It was rolling, continuous, the sky dragging something heavy across its own floor. Rain struck the windows in gusts that sounded like handfuls of gravel. The phone rang again at 3:15 a.m. A man asking about his mother. Her name was Doreen Greer. I told him the service was tomorrow. He asked if the flowers had arrived. I told him I would check first thing in the morning. He thanked me and hung up. It rang again at 3:40 a.m. A young woman, she couldn't have been older than 20, asking about someone named Lil Kenny. Not Kenneth, Lil Kenny. She was trying not to cry. I told her Lil Kenny was here and the service was tomorrow and she was welcome to come. She said, okay. I just needed to know where he was." She hung up. Every call was the same. Ordinary grief, real names, real love, real people on the other end of the line who had lost someone and were calling the only funeral home they trusted to ask if their person was there. And I told them yes, because the book told me to tell them yes, and because this is the part I need you to hear. I believed it. Not supernaturally. Not because I thought ghosts were making phone calls. I believed it the way you believe a student who tells you they're struggling at home. You believe it because the pain is real, even if you can't verify the source. Between 4 o'clock and 4:30 a.m., I did something the book did not tell me to do. I went to the second-floor hallway and stood outside the preparation room. Rule 6. Do not check the preparation room. Whatever is happening there during a storm night is being done competently and with respect. I did not open the door, but I stood close enough to hear, and what I heard made me sit down on the hallway floor with my back against the wall and my hand over my mouth. Someone was working in there. I could hear the particular sounds of a body being prepared, the faucet running, the careful movement of stainless steel tools, the occasional low murmur that could have been singing or could have been talking or could have been the sound a person makes when they are focused on work they take seriously. I grew up in this building. I spent my childhood on the first floor while my uncle and my aunt worked on the second floor. And I know what embalming sounds like the way a baker's kid knows what a stand mixer sounds like. It is ordinary. It is professional. It is care applied to the dead by the living. Whoever was in that room was good. I sat on the floor and listened, and I cried. Not from fear, from something else. From the recognition that this building had been doing this work longer than I had been alive. Longer than Marvel had been alive. Longer than Clyde or his mother or Absalom, and the storm brought the dead who had nowhere else to go, and something in that room was still doing the work. I went back upstairs. I washed my face. I waited. At 5:08 a.m., 3 knocks on the apartment door, slow, deliberate, spaced about 2 seconds apart. The kind of knock you use on a door when you know someone is inside but you're not sure they want to open it. Rule 8. Do not answer. Say through the door, the home will open at 9. I stood 3 feet from the door. I said, the home will open at 9. The knocking stopped. I waited. 10 seconds, 20, 30, no fourth knock. I exhaled. I went to the window and looked down at the back lot. The rain had stopped. The eastern sky was the color of a bruise starting to heal, dark purple going gray at the edges. I could see the back lot and the tree line beyond it, and the red clay road that runs behind the property toward the cemetery. There were cars on the road, 5 or 6 of them, dark sedans, driving slowly in a line toward the cemetery with their headlights off. The last one paused at the turn. Its brake lights flashed once, not a signal, just the natural tap of a foot on a pedal. And then it turned, and they were all gone, moving north through the trees in the near dark. I watched until I couldn't see them anymore. Then I sat down on the bed and waited for sunrise the way you wait for a verdict. At 6:47 a.m., with full daylight through the windows, I went downstairs and unlocked the doors. The ground floor was immaculate. The viewing parlor looked exactly as it had the day before. The arrangement room was unchanged. There was no sign that anyone had been there, no footprints, no wet spots, no displaced chairs. I went to the second floor. I opened cold storage. Harold stamps on gurney 1, Corinne Belk on gurney 3, the person on gurney 5, and a new body on gurney 2. And another on gurney 4. 5. There were 5 bodies in a room that had held 2 when I went to bed on Friday night. I approached gurney 2. I lifted the edge of the sheet. A man, late 60s, dark-skinned, peaceful expression, wearing a hospital gown. His hands were folded on his chest. Someone had combed his hair. Gurney 4. A woman, mid-50s. Same peaceful expression. Same folded hands. She was wearing a blue house dress. Someone had closed her eyes and placed a small white cloth over her forehead, which is a preparation step. It keeps the features set while the tissue firms. Someone had started prepping her and stopped, as if they'd run out of time. Gurney 5. The small body that had been there since the count. I lifted the sheet. A boy, maybe 8 or 9. He was wearing church clothes and a white shirt, dark pants, clip-on tie. His shoes were polished. His hands were at his sides, and someone had placed a small toy car in his right hand. A red one, the kind you get at a Dollar General for 99 cents. I put the sheet back. I went to the office. I sat down. On the desk there was a stack of cash. I counted it. $4,500, exact, crisp bills, mostly 20s and 50s. Under the cash was a piece of paper, not notebook paper, not modern paper, but older stock, slightly yellowed, with a watermark I couldn't read. On it, in handwriting that was not Marvel's and not Clyde's and not anyone's I recognized, were 3 names: James Mosley, Doreen Greer, Kenneth Lil Kenny Armstead. Age 9. Below the names: services requested. Families have been notified. Thank you for keeping the home. I'm going to stop here and tell you what I think was happening, because if I don't say it now, I'll lose the thread, and teachers are trained to state the thesis before the evidence gets too heavy. Toussaint Family Funeral Home was not haunted. It was not cursed. It was not built on bad ground or consecrated with the wrong prayers or hiding some terrible crime. It was a black funeral home in Mississippi, which means it was a place that served people who had spent their entire lives, their entire deaths, being turned away from every other door. The white funeral homes in Leake County did not take black bodies until 1971, and even after integration, most black families in the county kept coming to Toussaint's because trust is not a policy change. Trust is a century of showing up. And some of those families, the ones who died in ways that were not recorded, or in places that were not acknowledged, or in times when a black death in Mississippi was not considered a death at all, but an adjustment in the county's bookkeeping, those families still needed a funeral home. They still needed someone to wash the body and comb the hair and fold the hands and tell the family that the service was tomorrow and they were welcome to attend. The storm brought them in. The building held them. The rules kept the living out of the way so the dead could be served with the same dignity they had been denied in life and denied again in death and denied again in history. That is what I believe. You can believe something different. But I am telling you what I saw, and I am telling you what I heard, and I am telling you that the boy on Gurney 5 was real, and his name was Lil Kenny, and someone had put a toy car in his hand. And if that is not love, then I do not know what love is. I should have gone back to Ohio. I did not go back to Ohio. I called my principal on Monday morning and told him I needed 2 more weeks. Family emergency. He was understanding in the way that people are understanding when they're relieved to have an excuse to give your classes to a long-term sub they've been wanting to try out. I didn't care. I had 5 bodies in cold storage and 3 families who were going to call within 48 hours and a building that expected me to do my job. So I did my job. I prepared James Mosley first. He was, this is strange to say, easy. My body remembered the work even though my conscious mind had not done it since I was 17, the last summer I spent in Kipling, when Marvel let me assist with basic preparation, washing, setting features, dressing. I did not embalm, I don't have the certification, and I wasn't about to start now, but the bodies did not need embalming. They were in a state of preservation that I cannot explain and am not going to try. They were fresh. That is the word. They were as fresh as if they had died that morning, regardless of when they had actually died, which in the case of Doreen Greer was 1987, and in the case of Lil Kenny Armstead was 1955. I know those dates because the families called on Monday, just as the note said they would. Mrs. James Mosley called at 10:15 a.m. She asked if she could bring the gray suit. I said yes. She arrived at 11, a small woman in her 70s, impeccably dressed, carrying a garment bag. She handed it to me and said, "He always looked so handsome in this one." I told her the service would be Tuesday at 2. She nodded and left. Doreen Greer's son called at noon. He was in his 50s. He said, "I've been looking for her for a long time." I told him Tuesday at 4. He said he'd bring the family. The call about Lil Kenny came from a woman who identified herself as his sister, who was now 78 years old. She said, "They told Mama he fell in the river, but we never found him. Is he really there?" I said, "He's here, ma'am. He's being taken care of." She was quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. Then she said, 70 years. I've been waiting 70 years to bury my brother." I held the phone and I let her cry, and I did not hang up until she was ready. The services were held on Tuesday. They were not unusual services. They were Baptist, mostly. Hymns, prayers, eulogies, the steady rhythm of a black Southern funeral where grief and celebration are not opposites, but partners. The families were real, the tears were real. The food that appeared afterward, because there is always food, was real. Fried chicken and potato salad and pound cake and green beans and sweet tea, and all of it brought by people I did not know who came into the funeral home and set up the arrangement room like they'd done it 1,000 times. Odessa Pratt was there. She was at all 3 services. She sat in the back row and she did not cry, and she did not speak, and after the last service she came to me and said, "Marvel chose right." I said, "Mrs. Pratt, what is this place?" She looked at me. She was wearing a black dress and a hat with silk flowers on it, and her eyes were the clearest eyes I have ever seen on a living person. "It's a funeral home, baby. It's the only funeral home that will take everybody. Living or dead, or in between, or lost or forgotten, or thrown in a river in 1955 because a 9-year-old boy looked at the wrong person's daughter. It's the only door that doesn't close." She touched my cheek. Her hand was dry and cool and impossibly steady. "Your great-great-grandfather built this place because he met a woman on the road in a storm who was carrying her baby, and the baby was dead and no one would let her in. No white church, no white funeral parlor, no hospital, not even the colored church because the baby had been dead too long and they were afraid. Absalom took the baby, and he washed her, and he wrapped her, and he buried her in his own yard. And that night the woman came back, and she was not alone. And she said, 'There are more of us. Build us a house.' And he did." She dropped her hand. She adjusted her purse on her arm. "The storm is when they come home. The rules keep you out of their way, that's all. It's not complicated. It's just what it is." She left. I did not see her again for 3 weeks, and when I did, the context was very different. I want to tell you about the second storm night, because the second storm night is when I understood that the rules were not complete. March, 3 weeks later. I was still in Kipling. I had not gone back to Ohio. My principal had replaced me with a long-term sub, and when I called to ask about my position, I could hear in his voice that the sub was better than me and cheaper than me, and I should not expect to be welcomed back with streamers and cake. I did not care. This is the truth, and it shames me, but I did not care. I was running a funeral home. I was preparing the regular dead. 2 more had come in through normal channels, natural deaths, expected, and I was waiting for the next storm. It came on a Wednesday night. Tornado watch for Leake County at 8 p.m. I followed the rules. I counted 2 bodies in cold storage, both mine, both expected. I locked the ground floor. I went upstairs. I sat in the armchair. I waited. The voices came at midnight. More of them this time, 6, 7, maybe more. They were louder, not in volume but in urgency. I could catch fragments now. Not words exactly, but the shape of words, questions, disagreements, the sound of people who need something done and are not sure there's time to do it. The elevator ran at 1:30 a.m., faster cycles. It went up and down with a purpose that felt different from the first time, less routine, more hauling. I thought of moving vans. I thought of loading docks. I thought of people getting as much as possible through a door before the door closes. The phone rang at 2 a.m. A man, frantic, not polite. "I need to know if you have my daughter. Her name is Annelle Bishop. She was please tell me you have her." The desperation in his voice was not ghost story desperation. It was father desperation. It was the sound a man makes when he has been looking for his child for longer than his child was alive. "She's here, sir. She's being taken care of. Oh God. Oh, thank God. I've been calling everywhere. Nobody—" His voice broke. "Nobody would even write her name down." "I have her name. Annelle Bishop. I have it written down right now. She was 6. She was only 6. I know, sir. We'll take care of her." He could not speak for almost a minute. When he could, he said, "Tuesday?" "Tuesday," I said, though I had no idea why I said Tuesday. "I'll be there. I'll bring her mother. Her mother hasn't been right since. But she'll come for this." He hung up. The phone rang 4 more times before dawn. Each call was the same, desperate, grateful, naming someone who had been lost and was now found. I said yes to all of them. I wrote down every name. But at 3:20 a.m. something happened that was not in the rules. The preparation room door opened. I was in the second-floor hallway. I had gone down to use the bathroom, the only one besides the apartments, which had a burst pipe I hadn't fixed yet, and I was 10 feet from the prep room when the door swung inward, slowly, the way a door opens when someone inside pulls it but doesn't step through. Inside, the light was on. I could see the stainless steel table. I could see the instrument tray. I could see the back of a person standing at the table, working. They were wearing a dark apron. Their hands were gloved. Their head was bent in concentration. They were small shorter than me, and I am 5'4", and their shoulders had the particular hunch of someone who has done this work for so long that their body has shaped itself around the table. The person did not turn around, but they spoke. "Renee, there are too many tonight." The voice was a woman's. It was old. It was not Marvel's. I knew Marvel's voice the way I know my own breathing, but it was familiar in a way that made my chest hurt. The way a song is familiar when you heard it as a child and forgot it, and then someone hums 3 notes of it in a grocery store, and you're suddenly 5 years old in a kitchen that doesn't exist anymore. "There are too many, and I cannot finish before dawn. I need you to help me. Rule 6 says do not enter the preparation room. Rule 6 says the work is being done competently and with respect. Rule 6 does not say what to do when the work exceeds the capacity of whoever is doing it." I did not go in, not because I was following the rules, because I was terrified in a way I had not been before, not of the person in the room, but of what it would mean to cross that threshold, to go from someone who answered the phone and counted the bodies and locked the doors to someone who worked alongside whatever was in that room. There is a line between witnessing and participating, and I was not ready to cross it. "I'm not ready yet," I said. The same words as the elevator. They came out of me without thought. The person at the table paused. Their shoulders dropped slightly, not in defeat, in patience. The patience of someone who has asked before and been told no before, and will ask again because the work doesn't stop. "When you're ready," they said. The door closed. I went upstairs. I sat in the chair and I shook for 20 minutes. Then I stopped shaking and I started thinking. At dawn, I counted 7 bodies in cold storage. 7. I had started the night with 2. 5 new dead who needed preparation, services, families notified, graves dug, paperwork filed, everything. And the cash on the desk was $12,000 and the names on the paper were 5 names I did not know, and one of them was Annelle Bishop, age 6, and the date next to her name was 1964. I prepared them. All 5. It took me 3 days. I worked 18-hour shifts. I called the families as they called me. I scheduled the services. I contacted Kipling Memorial about plots and the groundskeeper, a silent man named Horace who seemed to understand exactly what was happening without being told, had the graves ready each morning before I arrived. The services were held. The families came. They were real and old and grieving for people they had lost decades ago. Children drowned. Men disappeared. Women who walked into the woods and never came out. People whose deaths were not investigated because the county did not investigate black deaths in 1955 or 1964 or 1979. At the third service, a very old man took my hand and said, "Where did you find her? Where was my wife?" I didn't know what to say. I said, "She was brought to us." He said, "By who?" And I said, "Because it was true. By the people who never stopped looking." April came. Storm season in Mississippi accelerates through April. The watches and warnings came every 4 or 5 days. I followed the rules each time. The pattern held voices in the parlor, the elevator running, phone calls from the desperate and the grieving, new bodies at dawn, cash on the desk, names on the paper. I prepared them all. I held the services. I buried them. My life in Ohio dissolved. My apartment lease expired and I let it. My position at the school was filled permanently. My friends texted less. My mother called and I told her I was running the funeral home, and she was quiet for a long time, and then she said, "Renee, that place will eat you alive." And I said, "Mama, it's not eating me, it's employing me." And she said, "That's what Marvel said too," and hung up. She was not wrong to worry. I was losing weight. I was not sleeping well on storm nights. The work was physically exhausting and emotionally annihilating because everybody that appeared at dawn was a person who had been lost, not metaphorically lost, not lost in the system lost, but gone, erased, removed from the world by violence or negligence or the simple grinding machinery of a state that did not count black deaths as deaths. And I was the one who received them, and I was the one who washed them, and I was the one who called their families and heard, every time, the same devastating sound of a wound that had never been allowed to close finally being acknowledged. I was doing good work. I want you to know that. Whatever else happened, whatever you think of the rest of this story, I was doing good work. But the work was growing. The third storm night brought 9 bodies. The fourth brought 11. The fifth, a massive system in late April that spawned 3 tornadoes in Leake County and kept me locked in the building for 16 hours, brought 19. 19 bodies. In a cold storage unit that holds 6. I found them everywhere. On the preparation table, on the floor of the hallway, laid out carefully on sheets. In the viewing parlor, arranged in chairs as if waiting for a service that had not yet begun. One was in the arrangement room, seated at the table, hands folded, as if she had come to plan her own funeral and was waiting patiently for me to begin the consultation. I could not prepare 19 bodies alone. The math was simple and brutal. Each preparation takes 4 to 6 hours. I can work 18 hours a day. That's 3 or 4 bodies a day. 19 bodies would take nearly a week, and the next storm could come in 3 days. I called Jeffcoat. I asked about hiring an assistant. He was careful. "Ms. Watts, your aunt operated alone for 9 years. My aunt had fewer storm nights." Long pause. "I don't know what you mean by that." "Mr. Jeffcoat, do you know about the storm book?" An even longer pause. "I know that your aunt had protocols for severe weather. I considered them personal and did not inquire. I need help. I need someone who can do preparation work. Is there anyone in the county?" "There was a woman who helped Clyde before your aunt took over. Her name is you should talk to Odessa Pratt." I found Odessa Pratt at the Kipling post office collecting her mail. She was wearing a tracksuit and house shoes, and she looked at me like she'd been expecting me for 3 weeks. "Running out of hands," she said. Not a question. "Yes, ma'am." Marvel managed because Marvel was Marvel. She could prep a body in 3 hours flat, and she didn't sleep during storm season. She said sleep was for the grieving. Odessa tucked her mail under her arm. "You're not Marvel." "No, ma'am." "You're not worse. You're just not built to do it alone. Nobody should be. Marvel shouldn't have been." I told her. Clyde told her. She was stubborn as hot grease. "Mrs. Pratt, the rules say not to go into the preparation room during storm nights. But last time someone inside asked me to help, they said there were too many." Odessa went still. Not frightened still, thinking still. "They spoke to you?" "Yes." "What did they sound like?" I described the voice, the familiarity, the patience. Odessa closed her eyes. When she opened them, they were wet. "That's Absalom's wife, Geneva. She's been working the storm since 1951. She's the one who taught Clyde's mother. She trained every Toussaint who ever held that building. And if she's asking for help, baby, then something has changed." "Changed how?" Odessa looked at me for a long time. The parking lot of the Kipling post office was empty except for my car and her Buick. The sky was clear, but the air had that pressure. "More are coming," she said. "It's getting worse. You feel it? The state's digging again. New highway through Neshoba County, new development in Canton. Every time they break ground in Mississippi, they find what they buried and they pour concrete over it, and the dead go somewhere, and that somewhere is a storm, and that storm comes to the only door that doesn't close." She put her hand on my arm. "You go in that room, Renee. You're not visiting. You're joining the staff. Geneva will teach you what the book can't, but you won't come back out the same. You understand? You'll be able to hear them all the time. Not just storm nights. All the time. The lost ones. Calling. Asking where they are. Asking if anyone wrote their name down." "I already hear them," I said. "On the phone." "On the phone is a receiver. In the room is a frequency. You will carry it." I thought about this. I thought about my apartment in Ohio that I no longer had, and my classroom that I no longer had, and my students who were doing fine without me, and my mother who thought this place was eating me alive. "Will I still be able to do the work?" I asked. Odessa smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who has watched other people make this decision and knows what it costs. "Baby, you'll be better at it than anyone who's ever stood in that building. That's the price." The next storm came on a Friday night in early May. I followed the rules. I counted. I locked the doors. I sat in the armchair. At 1 a.m., the elevator ran. At 2 a.m., the phones rang 6 calls, 6 names, 6 families who had been waiting years or decades. At 3 a.m., I went to the second-floor hallway. The preparation room door was open. The light was on. Geneva. I knew it was Geneva. I cannot tell you how I knew. I simply knew the way you know when your mother is in the next room. Even if you can't see her, Geneva was at the table, working. Her back was to me. She was smaller than I'd thought. Her apron was dark and clean. Her hands moved with a speed and precision that I recognized as mastery, the kind of competence that comes from 75 years of practice. There were bodies on every surface. The table, the counters, the secondary gurney that Marvel kept for overflow. Small ones and large ones and old ones and young ones. The room was full. Geneva did not turn around. She said, "Close the door behind you. Gloves are in the 3rd drawer." I crossed the threshold. I closed the door. I put on gloves. She turned to me then. I'm not going to describe her face, not because it was frightening, it was not, but because some things are private. And what Geneva Toussaint looks like after 75 years of washing the lost dead of Mississippi is between me and her. She handed me a comb. She pointed to a body on the counter. A man, middle-aged, still in the clothes he died in, which were work clothes, heavy canvas, stained with something I chose not to identify. "Start with his hair," she said. "He's been waiting a long time. Be gentle." I combed a dead man's hair at 3 a.m. in a room full of the unburied dead, and I am telling you that it was the most sacred thing I have ever done. More sacred than any church service, more sacred than any prayer. I combed his hair and I straightened his collar, and Geneva handed me a warm cloth, and I washed his face and his hands, and she said, "His name is Robert Alford, 1943, lumber camp." They said it was an accident. And the way she said they said it was an accident contained an entire inquest that no one had ever convened. We worked until dawn. We prepared 11 bodies in 4 hours. Geneva worked with the efficiency of a woman who has never had enough time and has never used that as an excuse. She spoke only to tell me names and dates and the occasional instruction. Fold his hands left over right. He was left-handed, or she wants her hair down, not pinned. And I followed her because she was the teacher and I was the student, and the lesson was how to give a funeral to someone the world insists never existed. At 5 a.m. she stopped working. She looked at the window. The sky was going gray. "Dawn soon. I have to go." "Where?" She looked at me. "Where do you think?" I didn't answer. "I'm in the collection, Renee. I died in 1951. 2 months after Absalom built the home. I was the first person he prepared. And I was so angry not at dying, at the unfinished work that I stayed. And I have been here for every storm since." She untied her apron. She folded it. She set it on the counter. "The rules were Absalom's. He wrote them to protect the living because the dead don't need protection. We need workers. We need hands. There are so many of us, Renee. So many who were never buried right. And more every year, every time they dig and build and pave and pretend the ground is empty." "I can hear them now," I said. "Even standing here, even before tonight, I can hear them. I know. That's why Marvel chose you. She could hear them too. Every Toussaint can. You just had to come home." She walked toward the door. She stopped. "The 4th knock," she said. "Rule 8, if they knock a 4th time. The book says to open the door and help them. Yes, the 4th knock is someone who is dead and doesn't know it yet. They're confused. They're at the door of a funeral home at 5 a.m. and they don't know why. They only know they're supposed to be here. You open the door and you tell them what's happened and you take them in and you prepare them yourself. Not me. You. The living have to be the ones who say it." "Say what?" "You died. You're safe now. Let me take care of you." She left the room. I did not see her leave the building. I don't think she leaves the building. I think she is the building in some way, its operating principle, its professional conscience, the first member of a staff that will never be large enough for the work. It's October now. I've been running Toussaint Family Funeral Home for 8 months. Storm season peaked in June. 27 storm nights between March and September, and I have prepared 143 bodies that arrived by storm. 143 people who had never been properly buried. Children from the river, men from the lumber camps and turpentine farms, women from the houses where they worked, and the roads where they were found, and the fields where they fell, and the jails where they died on nights when the paperwork said natural causes and the bruises said otherwise. People from 1920 and 1948 and 1963 and 1971 and 1989 and 2004, and one, a boy, 16, still in his school uniform from 2019. Each one has a name. Each one has a family that calls within 48 hours. Each one gets a service and a burial and a headstone. Horace digs the graves. Odessa handles the flower arrangements and the food. Jeffcoat does the legal work, which involves a degree of creative paperwork that I suspect would not survive scrutiny, but which no one in Leake County has ever questioned, because the county does not question Toussaint's, not anymore, not after 75 years. The lockbox in the floor has more money in it than I have ever seen. I do not touch it. It is for the building. I think it always has been. I opened the door on the fourth knock twice. The first time it was a woman in her 40s, still wearing a hospital bracelet. She looked at me and she said, "Why am I here?" And I said, "You died. You're safe now. Let me take care of you." She stood in the doorway for a long time, and then she came inside, and I made her tea. She could hold the cup. She could drink. I don't know how. I have stopped trying to understand the mechanics. And she told me about her children and her job and the chest pains she'd ignored for 6 months because she didn't have insurance, and she was afraid that if she went to the hospital they'd find something she couldn't afford to fix. She died of a heart attack in a Walmart parking lot in Yazoo City, and no one identified her body for 3 weeks because she was between addresses and her family didn't know she'd moved. Her sister called Tuesday. I told her the service was tomorrow. She came. She brought the children. The second time I opened the door on the fourth knock, it was a teenager. 17. He didn't speak. He just looked at me with an expression I have seen on my 8th graders' faces 1,000 times, the expression that says I am in a place I don't understand, and I need an adult to explain it to me. I said the words. He came inside. I let him sit in the viewing parlor until he was ready to talk, and when he was ready, what he said was, "Is my mama going to know?" I said, "She'll know by Tuesday." He said, "Tell her I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was just walking home." I wrote it down. I wrote it on the intake form, in the notes section, where it says, "Special instructions." I wrote, "He was just walking home." When his mother called, I read it to her. She screamed, not in horror, in recognition. She said, "That's what I told them. I told them he was just walking home and they said they'd look into it and they never called me back. That was in 2016. They never called me back." I have been in this building for 8 months and I have 143 names in my ledger, and every one of them is a person that the state of Mississippi misfiled, miscounted, overlooked, or actively erased. And the storms keep coming and the dead keep arriving and Geneva keeps working and I keep working alongside her. And Odessa keeps bringing flowers and Horace keeps digging graves and the phone keeps ringing with voices that have been waiting decades for someone to answer and say, yes, they're here, they're being taken care of, the service is tomorrow. I am not holding a line. I am not resisting something. I am not eroding or persisting or maintaining a system I don't understand. I understand it perfectly. It is a funeral home. It serves everyone. It always has. The rules exist because the dead have their own schedule and their own logistics, and they are bringing their own dead to the only place that will take them. And the living need to stay upstairs and let them work. That's all. It is not complicated. It is just what it is. I want to end by telling you about something that happened last week. Not a storm night, a regular Tuesday afternoon. Clear sky, 72 degrees, the kind of October Mississippi day that makes you understand why people stay despite everything. I was in the arrangement room, going over service details with a family, a living family, the regular kind, planning their grandmother's funeral the regular way. Normal afternoon, normal work. The front door opened. I heard feet in the hallways, small feet, quick, and a boy appeared in the doorway of the arrangement room. He was about 8 or 9. He was wearing a white shirt, dark pants, a clip-on tie. His shoes were polished. He looked at me and he smiled. I knew him. He was the first. Gurney 5. Lil Kenny Armstead, who went into the river in 1955 because he looked at the wrong person's daughter. He didn't speak. He walked to the display of photographs on the wall, the Toussaint family gallery, Absalom in Geneva, and everyone since. And he studied them the way a child studies things, with his whole body, leaning close, mouth slightly open. Then he turned back to me and held up his hand. He was holding the toy car, the red one, the one someone had placed in his hand on the gurney. He set it on the table in front of me. He smiled again. He left. I sat at that table with the family I was serving and a toy car in front of me, and I said, "Excuse me for just one moment." And I went to the bathroom and I closed the door, and I held the car against my chest, and I felt something break open inside me that I have been holding closed since I was 12 years old, and my mother put me in the car and drove north and told me never to look back. He came back. He was buried and mourned and given his service and his headstone and his name, and he came back, not as a ghost, not as a haunting, as a child visiting a place where he was treated with kindness, the way any child visits any place where they felt safe. I put the car on the shelf in the office next to Absalom's photograph. It's there now. Lil Kenny's car in a funeral home that will take everyone, living or dead, storm or shine, and will keep taking everyone until the last name is written down and the last family is called and the last person who is thrown into a river or buried in a field or left on a road in Mississippi is brought home and washed and combed and dressed and laid to rest with someone standing over them saying, "I have your name. I wrote it down. You are not lost anymore." The storm book is still in the desk. I have added my own notes in the margins, the way Clyde did, the way Marvel did. My handwriting is messier than theirs. My notes are mostly practical. The elevator pulls left now. Call the service guy and new family. Bishops out of Neshoba County. Daughter Annelle, 6 years old, 1964. They bring yellow flowers every time, and on the last page, a note that is not practical at all, but that I wrote because it needed to be written somewhere. If you are reading this, and I am gone, the home is yours. The rules are real. The dead are real. The work is sacred and it is endless. Do not be afraid of the elevator or the voices or the phone calls or the door at dawn. Be afraid only of a world that made this place necessary. Geneva will teach you. Odessa will feed you. Horace will dig, and the storms will bring them home. Answer the phone. Open the door. Write down the names. Toussaint means all saints. Great-great-grandfather Absalom knew exactly what he was building. I teach 8th grade English, and I know a thesis statement when I see one. The thesis of this building, of this family, of this work, is 6 words long, and it was spoken to me by a dead woman at 3 in the morning while I combed a man's hair who had been waiting 80 years for someone to bother. You died. You're safe now. That is the whole gospel of Toussaint Family Funeral Home. That is the whole purpose of the Storm Book. That is why Marvel chose me, and why I am not going back to Ohio, and why I am telling you this story, which is not a warning and not a confession and not a plea for help, but a simple, factual account of a building in Kipling, Mississippi that does what it has always done. It keeps the door open. It takes everyone. It writes down the names. And if you ever find yourself in Leake County during a storm, and you see a line of dark cars driving north toward the cemetery with their headlights off, don't be afraid. They're just going to the service. They've been waiting a long time. Let them go.